So we have a brand new Amazon Prime series called Them that I have begun to dive into, and I'll give you my thoughts on the very first episode right after the jump. Real quick, if you haven't already, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to the channel, ring that bell below anytime we have something. You will be among the first to know. So Amazon has released this series and put all the episodes out at once. I can tell you very quickly that there is no way in hell that I am going to be binging this series. This is something that I'm going to have to take my time with, and I will discuss every episode, talk about every episode after I watch it. I'll just come do one. But just based on the triggers that occur in this episode and how mentally exhausting this isn't something that I plan on or sitting through. I'm going to need to have some reprieve to get through this. Um, I think I'm not entirely sure where I sit on the spectrum of the historical black horror trauma that we're starting to get with Lovecraft and us to an extent, although it wasn't necessarily done in past tense. But using historical stuff that actually has happened in real life and then putting it against the backdrop of horror, which is in itself, without adding other elements of whatever the hell else you layer in, that in itself is just horror to people of color, specifically African Americans. So then to add on to that with more horror, so almost like American Horror Story, it can be a lot. It can be a little dizzying and kind of like a confusing as to what exactly this show is getting to. And I hope that it does a little bit better as it goes along. So the very first episode of them is called Day One. It is looks like it's labeled by the days of the week. At the very top of the show, there's a blurb that says that there was a whole migration from the south to different parts of the country to sort of get away and get a better form of life. Some folks went to California, some people went up north, but basically they went their separate ways. And then it goes into a sort of bit of a almost old school horror font and redness and says that, like, hey, this story is going to be about the 10 days that this family went through as they moved into an all white neighborhood in Los Angeles. What would be labeled as, I guess, the second Great Migration. There are some folks of color in Watts and Compton in Los Angeles at this time, but this family, Liv and Henry, decide to take themselves and their two daughters to live in a more upscale area of LA. Henry does the move and the migration with some false pretenses. He doesn't tell his family, specifically his wife, he doesn't let her know that the home is signed on paperwork that made it almost impossible for us to own ownership or have a home. Anybody with a drop of Negro blood was considered not human enough and was not considered to be able to own property. And that still was the paperwork that he had to sign. So it made it a little unclear as to whose home that was. But he didn't tell his wife that. They get here. He's also got a job at an engineering firm, and he's going to be one of the first African Americans to actually work in that building in the engineering department. Usually it's in trash or mail call or whatnot like that. So he has put the bullseye on their back already, just off of the mental anguish that he has to go in through to these mental gymnastics that people of color have to play with to live into this world. They very much don't want to be put in a box of what, saying, "Oh, this is where you guys go. This is where black people go." And I get this. Like, you're like, "This is where you go. This is where you guys belong. Don't come out here and play in our sandbox." They're like, "F that. We're gonna go play in this sandbox because we don't want to be put in a box. We want to do whatever the hell it is that you guys have rights to do this stuff. We want to have those rights to do that too." So they go to live in this neighborhood. I mean, and it's like these guys walked in with the dick swinging. That's how much people are just paying attention to them, and they're like, the second these women, nosy neighbors, these stepford wives are like always watching anything that happens in the neighborhood. They see the house finally sold. They're like, "Oh, cool. Who's going to be the new neighbor?" And the second they see that it's people of color, they lose their shit. These women all are stopped staring and like mouths drop, mouths agape. They are just baffled how anybody of color, one, could have enough education and or money to buy this place. They're like, oh, there's no way they bought this. They sold this for less. They can't afford this like we could. But it's fascinating because even as they were coming around the corner, you could just the phone calls were starting to be made to other houses in that neighborhood saying, "What the hell is happening? Why are these colored folks walking in? We're driving in this neighborhood." Um, and that in itself is terrifying. They move in, they're getting their place, and these women take it upon themselves to just take up their daily. They don't have shit else to do. They're cooking husbands for the house and having sex. And popping out babies. That's literally their purpose. And so they line up on the front lawn with some iced tea tables. They're just gonna sit on the front of these newly owned African American owners and just like not say anything, not cause any harm, just make it uncomfortable for them. And that is terrifying. That's frightening. To the point that Liv is like, I got my gun locked and loaded. I'm ready to do some crazy shit. These folks want to step up. These dumb, as they keep calling her, these dumb bitches played by Allison Pill. If they want to keep doing shit, then I'm gonna play. I'm gonna play with them. I'm gonna show them how crazy I am. What's good to me, it's shot well. It's done well. Performances are great. I think Allison Pill is being the person that you actively want to hate. I think both Liv and Henry's their actors are playing them fantastically. The daughters are great. I think when this story is about the racial stuff that is occurring in that time, it hits on all cylinders. The show also is layering in some other things, and obviously just on episode one of day one, the dog has some feelings about what's going on in that basement. I think there's some more historical stuff that's at play here. It seems like the wife seems to be having some sort of. She keeps saying that she's not crazy. Yeah, so I wonder if she had some type of mental break or some mental lapse. But there seems to be something because there's a whole sequence here with her youngest daughter that she is sort of seeing her be something else than she is when she's doing a little dance, and it's not clear if that is something that she's been possessed and the kid is actually doing these weird dances, or if it's just the mom seeing it and having sort of a mental chasm or mental break. It's not clear. And then there's some weird when the youngest daughter wakes up in the middle of the night. They make a claim, they being the husbands. The wives are getting together, doing their drinking stuff, and saying, "Hey, I don't know how these people can afford this. You know how they sold it for less." The guys are all together, sort of saying, "Hey, we got to get these folks out of here." There's a fascinating line in here saying that they aren't just going to leave easily because they've come from a place that was worse. So we have to do everything humanly possible to make this the new worse. They say we're going to kill their dog. That's the first thing you do, and I mean, you seen what happened to John Wick. You kill his dog, he's gonna fuck everybody up. So it's interesting that that's the first step that they decide to do. There are some husbands who are like, we can't burn this place down or throw a rock in there. There are kids, so at the very least, there are some folks that are like, hey, we may not like the adult versions of them. That's a fascinating line because a lot of the times the second black kids get from being almost like 13 to 16, they stop being kids anymore. People start seeing them as adults, and then the hate that they have immediately pops in because they don't see them as anymore as being a minor or a child. They now see them as being an animal or the worst part of society because they're no longer considered to be teenagers or kids. Kids actually, teenage boys have a shorter window. Usually, it's from once they hit 11, 12, they stop being that, and girls probably 16 or 18, and there's a line that you can't really tell how old the oldest daughter is. That just triggered me. It was pretty upsetting. But there's like, oh, who knows? She could be 8 from 30, but we need to keep her away from our boys, because we don't want a mud baby. Those are the type of crazy things that are being said here. But I brought all that up to say that the husbands decide to kill the dog, which occurs in this episode, but it's not clear if it's done supernaturally or not. Because there's somebody in the home and then there's this weird, crazy looking figure that sort of chokes out the kid, but it's not clear if that's humanly done or if there's some spiritual or ancestral thing that has occurred to kind of make this crazy looking, just odd thing happen. So the show is sort of in this weird window. Lovecraft did it too, but I think they just handled it better, but it's in this weird window where there's some realism happening, but there's also some supernatural stuff, and I hope they do a better job of blending that or making it mesh. Because right now it seems like we're doing two different things, and that's going to be a lot of plates to spin if we don't get a better handle on that in the future episodes. I dug it. Like I said, I think it fits. It's just for each of these episodes, I'm going to have to take a moment, probably a couple of drinks, and to kind of get through it because it's a hard watch. It's a triggering watch. I will say this: if anybody has Lovecraft, those first couple episodes when they're running from daylight to try to cross the border to be safe, stuff like Us or Get Out, or even something like the Janelle Monáe movie that came out. My mind's blanking out on when I did it here on this channel. But if those type of movies are triggering and just upsetting to you, this probably wouldn't be something that you actually need to watch. I think you should avoid this and watch something that's a little bit better or more uplifting. I don't think this show, from what I've seen so far from episode 1, is good enough to justify breaking down your mental or emotional walls and triggers just to watch it. Like, I don't think this is entertaining enough to justify that. Not yet. But I will continue on begrudgingly a little bit to see if it does get to a point where it's like, okay, this is some high brow or high volume or high quality horror that it's worth it. You just need to take your time. But what did you guys think about day 1, episode 1 of Them? Go ahead, leave your comments in the comments below. If you haven't already, you can follow us on Twitter at HollywoodADI. You can hit us up on email at HollywoodAlreadyDidIt@gmail.com. We also have a podcast with the same name that's on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that plays podcasts. We're there. We're currently doing a run on there about Buddies for Life. So buddy films throughout the years through the eyes of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier with our guest host, Jamie Jurek. You can find that here or anywhere else that podcasts are played. We also have a sister podcast called You Can't Do That Anymore, where we talk about classic films like Back to the Future, Gone with the Wind, or West Side Story, and look at those films for when they came out through the eyes of 2021 and seeing if some of the things they got away with then they could still do today. But like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.